那下面呢，将为各位带来分享的这位嘉宾呢，是一位国际嘉宾Haffner， 他是恒隆地产的副董事，负责制定集团可持续发展战略，并推动执行。他在亚洲和北美区域从事清洁技术、基础设施和可持续发展领域工作，已经超过20年，曾发表过环境、能源和国际事务等主题的著作超过20个。那下面我们将有请他为大家带来房地产迈向净零碳道路上的机遇和挑战的主旨演讲。让我们掌声有请 John。刚才我们在台下做了交流，我们这位国际嘉宾应该会给大家一个惊喜哈，因为他能讲一口我觉得还很好的标准的普通话。我们把舞台交给他。
谢谢 Tam， 我会喝一点水。OK， 大家好，我住在北京，从2002年到2014年，所以我非常开心回来北京了。住在北京以后，我住在香港，所以我的普通话没有以前好。所以我会今天用英文讲。但是如果你们再邀请我的话，我会说一说，下次用中文讲，你们觉得好不好？So for those of you friends from abroad, I was just saying my Chinese is rusty. I was able to say that a little bit, but I'm going to be speaking English today. But if you'll have me back again, I'll try to speak the whole time in Chinese. But I'm glad we have some very professional translators here today. So it's a real pleasure to be here back in Beijing. I love this city. I lived here. It's a wonderful city, wonderful culture. And I think a lot of important things are happening in China around sustainability. So I'm going to speak to you today about opportunities and challenges on the path to net zero carbon in commercial real estate. So many of you, I think, know Hanglong. We have a diversified portfolio of world-class properties in multiple cities across mainland China as well as in Hong Kong. And we're actually gearing up for a large new project in Hangzhou that we're very excited about, so stay tuned for that. We have our high-end malls featuring luxury brands. And I'm going to come back to the theme of luxury a little bit later on in my talk, because that actually relates to net zero in interesting ways. In December 2020, we declared our ambition to become one of the most sustainable real estate companies in the world. Now, we're not the only company with this ambition. In fact, we would like every company to have this ambition. We actually think that a race to excellence is what we all need. Just like in the Olympics, everybody brings each other up because everybody's trying to be the best. That's what we need in sustainability. So we don't want to hold this ambition to ourselves. We want everyone to have this ambition. But it certainly is our ambition to be among the leaders. We're the first real estate company in Hong Kong and mainland China to receive approval from the Science Based Target Initiative for our near and long-term company-wide emissions reduction targets in line with SBTi's net zero standard. So that's important because SBTi has become a norm setter around companies and their emissions targets. It's a way of checking to make sure that the targets companies set are of sufficient rigor, that they're supporting what the science says is required around emissions reduction. So we are very proud to be validated for our targets by SBTi, but we know it's only the start. Getting your target validated is the beginning of a very long journey. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So today I'm going to talk to you about our corporate strategy and governance, how we approach Scope 1 and 2 emissions reduction, and how we approach Scope 3 emissions reduction. And I want to start with governance because actually at Hanglong, when we talk about ESG, we think of the G as very much the foundation upon which work around E and S are possible. We think that good governance really lays the foundation for doing everything else. So I want to start there. Sustainability is really integrated within our corporate governance in a variety of ways. When we talk about corporate governance, we don't just mean the formal structures of the company. We also mean the kind of culture we're trying to build. And the culture we're trying to build is expressed through our vision, mission, values, and even our motto. And sustainability is present in many ways. When we talk about enriching lives, we mean it not only in the material sense, but also in the sense of well-being. We spend 90% of our time indoors, more or less. So the indoor environment and how we can nurture well-being is very important. So we need to enrich lives from a well-being point of view. We talk about sustainable growth. We mean it not only in the financial sense, which is very important in real estate and elsewhere, but also in the ESG sense. You can see the value of sustainability there. Also, I want to highlight the value of openness. We try to cultivate a culture that is receptive to ideas from people, no matter whether they're junior or senior, but also open to ideas from our partners, which I'll come back to later in my talk as well. And even our motto, we do it well. I want to highlight this, because I'm required to send out an email to all of our partners around this time of year to say to them that we hold the highest standards of integrity. And if anybody knows of an instance where we're not upholding that, here's our email for our whistleblower address. I'm required to send that out to all of our partners this time of year. So that's just an example of how even our motto and upholding integrity is very important. We see that as linked to sustainability, because if you don't do integrity well, you can't do everything else well. It's like your health. If your health is taken away from you, you can't then do a lot of other things in your life. So our CEO, Weber Loeb, has a quote that I like to share in these kinds of presentations because it really sums up the philosophy. Our mission of sustainable growth highlights both the financial and ESG dimensions of sustainability. We recognize that both are indispensable for our success. In the long run, if a company just does one and not the other, it's not going to work. If you have all kinds of great ESG ambitions and you run out of money, you can't sustain those ambitions. But on the other hand, if you're just thinking about making money and you're not thinking about what is needed for society in the long run, you're also going to run into difficulty because your stakeholders are going to put pressure on you and expect you to do more. So our governance, as I mentioned, advances sustainability in various ways. I report directly to the vice chair of the company, which is quite important. So we have top management support. Then I interact with him very regularly. I was messaging him just last night about arriving in Beijing. I also report to our CEO at least once a month, separately. And then I also report to our boards as a whole at least twice a year. And then we also meet with independent board members regularly. So when you see an org chart like this, sometimes it's hard to tell what's the real culture. The real culture at Hanglong is a highly engaged board and management that's very supportive of our ambitions. And I lead the sustainability team. Some of my colleagues are here from our Shanghai office that are on that team. And then we have various subcommittees and working groups and so on. But the structure, getting the right structure in place is quite important. We had our boards make a statement about ESG in 2020. The Hong Kong Exchange required listed companies in Hong Kong to make this kind of statement. And so many companies made a statement, but for us, it wasn't just tick the box exercise. We really thought about how we want to engage our boards, and it was important. It actually elevated the board's engagement on ESG. And that set the stage for target setting and so on, which I'll talk about next. The boards also endorsed our overall sustainability framework. You know, sustainability is such a vast subject. It encompasses so many dimensions. The question is, what do you focus on? And it's a challenge for all of us. Another colleague was saying the other day, sustainability is a fundamentally multidisciplinary subject. On our team, we have people with engineering backgrounds, business backgrounds, a lot of different backgrounds. You need to pool insights and resources from different disciplines. But we identified 4 main thematic areas or priorities. Climate resilience, which is about both emissions reduction and also adapting to a physically changing climate. So resource management, which is about moving from linearity to circularity. Well-being, which I spoke about before. Well-being in the built environment, we know after COVID is of vital importance. And what we call sustainable transactions, which is about really embedding these other 3 ideas along our value chain, working with our suppliers upstream, our tenants downstream, also working with our banks and financial institutions to provide us with sustainable finance. So it's really embedding the concept of sustainability throughout the entire value chain. So that kind of sets the stage for everything else. And it took time to establish our goals and ambitions. We set up the idea of annual strategic ESG KPIs in 2020. Those are tied to compensation. We set our 2030 goals and targets, all of this endorsed by the boards. Then we set 2025 targets because we said it's easy to say what we want to do 10 years from now. What about several years from now? The medium term is also important. And then we made these commitments around net zero. So with all of that, we have a sense of what we want to achieve from the annual right through to 2050. But it's important not just to have the 2050 ambition. It's important, I would suggest, for all of us to have these very short-term, measurable targets so that we can track our progress with intermediate milestones. And then I mentioned earlier our SBTI endorsement. This gives us very specific targets we need to achieve by both 2030 and 2050 across all of our scopes of emissions. And I mentioned the 2025 targets. Those are, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, those are targets that are tied to compensation through semi-annual performance reviews. So department heads and departments as a whole, they're expected to deliver on certain things, and it's part of their compensation review how they've delivered against those things. But one thing I want to highlight is that there's a lot of talk about net zero, and I like this quotation from McKinsey & Company that says, many commitments are running ahead of plans. Relatively few businesses have yet to make clear, detailed plans on how they will achieve net zero. And it is a big challenge. Let's acknowledge it's a big challenge for everybody. But the point here is that if you can put convincing net zero plans in place, you can distinguish your companies from your peers. Or, as they say, the basis of competition has changed. If you think of this as this race to excellence again, there is now a premium on sound net zero planning and execution. So it's not enough just to have the commitment. We need to develop credible plans. So just as a reminder, in the property sector, the 3 scopes of emissions, you have scope 1, which is direct emissions from operations, something like a diesel generator. You have indirect emissions from purchased energy, what we're buying from the grid. And then you have scope 3, which is both upstream and downstream. All the other indirect emissions associated with the company's activities. And scope 3 is complex, it's challenging, but we need to pay attention to it as well, not just our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So how are we approaching net zero? And I'm sharing with you something that's really a work in progress, and it's part of our, I guess, culture of openness and transparency, to be thinking out loud with our stakeholders and getting your feedback. So it's possible that 6 months from now, we'll do this chart a little bit differently, but this is where we are as of today. We have targets in different areas. We're formulating a reduction plan, starting some projects, and ultimately want to meet the reduction target in these different areas identified. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, grid decarbonization. We will benefit from that, but it's not something we can control directly to the extent that we're buying electricity from the grid, switching from fossil heating, reducing fugitive emissions from refrigerants. And the topic of refrigerants, by the way, is a blind spot in real estate. People don't realize there's very high global warming potential for refrigerants. It's an issue that the real estate sector is starting to take more seriously, but I would suggest that we all need to take more seriously, and the manufacturers of the HVAC systems and the refrigerants, we need to work with those partners. Then circularity, broadly, how we can use materials reuse so that we don't have to procure new materials and thereby also reduce emissions. Low carbon materials, and then the idea of beyond value chain reductions. And what I want to suggest to you, I don't like the word offsets. Personally, I think the idea of doing something above and beyond your core business reduction responsibility is a good idea, but it should be above and beyond. It shouldn't cancel out your obligation to make your own sectoral reductions. That's my own personal view, and we're thinking about doing something along that as well. So we see partnerships as critical for making progress across all of these 8 levers. So that's a really important point I want to highlight. It doesn't make sense for every one of us to be working on our emissions reduction plans and then another company working in parallel on another set of emissions reduction plans without any conversation back and forth. We all, for example, in real estate, we all need to engage with construction suppliers. It doesn't make sense for each of us to be doing that individually and then for our peers to be reinventing the wheel about how to do that. We need to come together to accelerate progress. It's a fundamentally important point that I want to highlight. So today I just want to talk about 4 out of these various levers, highlighting them in particular in the interest of time. We can maybe there's some questions, we can talk about the other areas as well. So energy efficiency, renewable energy, circularity, and low carbon materials. So for scope 1 and 2 emissions, energy efficiency and renewable energy are really the focus. And I would say energy efficiency, in fact, should be the foundation of almost every company's efforts because it's low-hanging fruit. You can get some quick wins. You get a payback when you do energy efficiency, and you also achieve emissions reductions. So it should be one of the very first things that everybody looks at in terms of the potential, what can be achieved there. We can do that through retro-commissioning, equipment upgrades, and also I see our colleague from BRI is here. We also have new properties achieving green building certifications that also raise the bar in terms of design standards for new buildings. And then in renewable energy, we do both off-site and on-site renewable energy. And to be transparent with you again, our on-site renewable energy makes up a very small proportion of our total electricity consumption. We have shading issues, we have limited space, but we're doing some interesting, innovative off-site renewable energy power purchase agreements, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I would say overall, the outlook for the renewable energy is so positive and exciting, and it's one of the areas where China's made a really big contribution. We were discussing last night one of the sources of optimism, renewable energy, and really this part of the world has contributed a lot to the price, the economics improving, and the scaling of renewable energy. So we have a greenhouse gas mitigation plan for our scopes 1 and 2 emissions that we started in 2020. And the basic concept here, maybe the slide looks a bit complicated, but the concept isn't that complex. The idea is that the properties together propose the projects to do the following year, and those targets have to meet or exceed our annual greenhouse gas and electricity intensity reduction targets. So it just has to add up. So this is how we make sure we're tracking on progress towards the plan. And ultimately, this plan is approved by the Vice Chair. In fact, this plan has evolved so that we're looking a few years ahead, because some projects maybe we don't want to do next year, we want to do a couple of years later. But the idea is fundamentally we're trying to develop a plan around the investments, around retrofitting, retrocommissioning, and so on. And so you can see our reduction progress for scopes 1 and 2, with various components contributing to that reduction. In fact, I have to say that 16.35% also includes some reduction in demand from COVID. So I have to check exactly how much of the 16.35%. So that's a little bit, I need to clarify. Some of that is from energy efficiency, on-site renewable energy. Also, there was a reduction in demand from COVID. But you have those components. Then we have the grid decarbonization. In Spring City, we have a power purchase agreement for renewable energy. And then we have reductions associated with reductions in heating demand and a very small part from Scope 1. So energy efficiency, as I mentioned earlier, is a really key lever towards the broader decarbonization. And so we think there may be a bit of a rebound with COVID behind us in terms of the electricity consumption. So one of the things we're highlighting internally is that retrocommissioning energy retrofit investments are critical if we achieve the 2025 target. If we don't achieve the 2025 target, we'll be transparent with our stakeholders about how we want to adjust for that. So this is the point again about planning. I think when I talk to investors that are very sophisticated on these issues, they're not necessarily so concerned that every year you're hitting exactly your target as understanding that you have a culture that takes this seriously and you're willing to make appropriate adjustments. But we hope we'll get there to 2025. So I mentioned renewable energy. We were pioneers in the power purchase agreement market. When Yunnan had just a pilot initiative around renewable energy, we moved in the market very quickly, became the first commercial complex in Yunnan to procure renewable energy there, and then we did the same thing in Jinan. And more recently, Beijing has clarified some of the policy expectations. So we had a deeper study this year of how we want to do power purchase agreements going forward in line with Beijing's GEC, Green Energy Certificate regime. But we're pleased that these projects were sort of early movers in power purchase agreements in China. And this is helping to reach our own 2025 target around renewable energy. So now we come to Scope 3 emissions, which is a very challenging area for everybody. So how are we thinking about it? This, partnerships are so important here that I actually make it its own theme on the right-hand side. But we're looking for lower carbon materials, we're looking to do more circularity, but we're also looking very much at working with stakeholders, because when we go upstream, we have a main contractor in construction projects, then the main contractor has its suppliers. And so, how do we reach the upstream? We need to engage others, and we need to work with universities. We have a partnership with Tsinghua University here in Beijing. And we're also looking to work with others, our tenants and banks and so on. So when you look at our Scope 3 emissions, you can see that it's 72% of our total emissions in 2022. So it's the biggest piece of the pie. And within that, overall, there are two largest sources of Scope 3. One is the emissions from our tenants. The other is from embodied carbon on our construction projects, which is very much tied to our project development cycle. So we already know, based where we are in construction, that we're going to have more embodied carbon emissions because these construction projects were started years ago, and they're now at that stage in the cycle where there will be more embodied carbon emissions in the projects. So we see embodied carbon as a key challenge for us in the years ahead. For the use and reuse of low carbon materials, we're partnering with a group called Clean CO2, which is based in Hangzhou and has affiliations with Zhejiang University. And we've been working with them to produce low carbon concrete bricks and associated byproducts for building construction. And we're the first commercial development project to work with with that organization. And we would say for this type of project, as an example, it's not actually achieving a scale to begin with, but the important thing is to get started. We have to start with small steps, set an example, proof of concept, and try to help accelerate these innovative technologies in the market. So we're very happy to be working with Clean CO2. They just received recognition, I think, recently in the People's Daily for the technology that they have. We're also partnering with our tenants. In particular, we're doing a very exciting, ambitious partnership with LVMH Group. You know that LVMH Group has multiple luxury brands that you've heard of, and we're very proud that they have multiple stores with us, more than 90 stores in our various properties. Actually, it's going to be more than that, including new projects. And we agreed with 26 of the brands to forge an innovative partnership around sustainability. And embodied carbon and energy efficiency are both themes under the partnership, but it also looks at other issues. It looks at a whole range of issues. And LVMH Group is already motivated to do sustainability, so they already understand the why. And so we often talk to them about, when we get together, it's not about the why, it's about the what and the how, because both groups are already motivated. The incentive to work together is that we can accelerate progress by working together. And as the Group Environment Development Director for LVMH said, this partnership will be a model around the world. So we're very proud that LVMH is starting this kind of innovation in China. They don't have a partnership like this in Europe or anywhere else in the world. They're learning here, and then they want to replicate this kind of innovative collaboration with the landlord elsewhere in the world. So it's a real privilege for us to be working with them. And there you can see our vice chair standing with Antoine Arnault, the son of Bernard Arnault, who's the owner of LVMH Group. And we also, in our office, we do circularity initiatives where we're reusing office resources. We're having a large renovation in Hong Kong. We're allowing our staff to take home furniture. We're also donating furniture to NGOs in need. We're also focusing on sustainable design features. We're working with Giga. The founder of Giga is based in Shanghai, and they have an ability to provide a score for circularity, health, and carbon on fit-outs and renovations. And that gives you a score, which is important because then you can do benchmarking. So the idea is to improve your carbon score, improve your circularity and health scores on the choices that you make. So we're working with them on that as well. And you can see some of the impacts of our various circularity initiatives here in terms of reuse, redistribution, and recycling, the number of office items, the number of staff members that have taken home items, the NGOs we benefited, the kilograms that we diverted from landfill and avoided CO2 emissions. So I think it's important. We have very large projects, but even we want to walk the talk in terms of our own office renovation and make sure that people are understanding that we need to live these principles as well. Whoops. So what are we doing over the next 12 months? We're focusing on a number of different areas. First, we want to develop a net zero roadmap. And this comes back to the earlier point I made about the importance of having a plan. So we have this process that we look ahead a few years. We want to push our thinking and challenge ourselves to look out even further in time and come up with various scenarios. To 2030 in particular, I think at a minimum, we want to be fairly specific. And after 2030, I think you start to make more assumptions. But we know that the renewable energy market in China will be fully liberalized by 2030, so that's interesting. That has implications for our ability to procure renewable energy, both before and after 2030. We know that the emissions trading system in China is developing. There's going to be pricing put on building materials and steel. We know that there are a number of other factors at play that will impact our ability to progress on the net zero journey. We want to go deeper in those scenarios, figure out with different variables, have more or less of a contribution, what's the implication for our net zero plan across our scopes of emissions. We're working to build our climate competencies internally at all levels of the organization. Even at our board level, they have people speaking to them about these issues. In our finance department, there's a strong link between climate and finance. We want our finance colleagues to understand that. We're also working to expand external partnerships. We're in discussions with, we work a lot with Urban Land Institute. There's a group called Steel Zero that we're in discussions with that is also trying to create a demand signal for low carbon steel. And we're leveraging sustainable finance to address our decarbonization efforts as well. So some takeaways for your consideration. On the left-hand side, you can see how we formulated our goals from net zero to 2050 right down to the annual KPIs. And I would suggest that every company should be having targets over various time horizons. We talked about certain levers for emissions reduction. We're going to be working on all of these. And there's various enablers to accelerate progress and implementation. I didn't talk about earlier with LVMH, we've established a sustainability action group in each property with the brands in those property to create a sense of community in each property around sustainability action so that people can coordinate, for example, turning off the lights. Sounds like a very simple thing, but it can make a difference. Make sure that people turn off the lights at night. Other issues that need to be coordinated property by property. And in terms of climate disclosure, the Hong Kong Exchange invited us to speak in July together with a couple of other leading companies. We were very proud of that because they thought we're doing a good job on climate disclosure. So they invited us to speak as part of their training academy to other listed companies in Hong Kong. So our view, again, is openness, transparency, and just learn and iterate. So let the market know what we're working on, not only what we're achieving, but what our challenges are. So I think I just skipped I might have just skipped one slide. I think I just wanted to highlight this, sorry. And then I'm just out of time. Some lessons learned: disaggregate problems, break problems down, have a sense of shared ownership, focus on data collection. Data drives everything. Without data, we can't get the insights. And make sure that you have support from the top. So with those are some key takeaways from the journey we've been on. We have a lot more work to do. We're a learning culture. We're all, I think, our team, we're all lifelong learners, and even our management. We know there's a lot more to be done. But those are some lessons that may help all of you. And I would just close by saying we're all in this together, so we welcome your insights and feedback as well, and I'm happy to pause for questions. Thank you.
谢谢，感谢John的分享。也让我们从更广阔的视角走进了这个可持续设计的更深入的一个角度。我们也把掌声再次送给他，谢谢。
No questions? No questions? 哦，我以为有问题，没有问题。
他说有没有朋友要跟他提问的，要想跟大家有互动的有没有？有的话可以举手。要是没有的话，大家也可以稍后来找我们来加一个微信，或者是有，来那就给一个有工作人员递下话筒吗？我们给一个名额。 好，来，这位女士，请您起来一下，谢谢。对，好。昨天我们跟吕博士还在聊，说这个大会就应该多一点互动，然后今天就有互动的了。
Thank you for the presentation. I really enjoy it. So my question is very simple. Can you share the PPT with us all?
Thank you for giving me such an easy question.
这个问题。
可以. We're happy to share the PPT with you.
Yeah, because it's very instructive and a lot of details. We really enjoy it.
We're happy to. As I say, we're cultivating this openness mindset, and we really mean this. We're all in this together. So happy to share the PPT with you. Thank you. 如果别人有问题的话，你可以直接以后找我。
好，这问题一提。 心里一慌哈，没事儿，那就下来之后再详细的联系吧。谢谢，我们掌声送给他，谢谢。